Hey everyone, and welcome to the Ocean Nomads Tribe interview series. In this program, I'll be sitting down with inspiring digital nomads who have embraced a life of adventure and freedom. We'll dive into their journeys, how they got started, what they do for work, and the lessons they've learned along the way. My goal is to bring you practical insights and real-life inspiration to help you build your own nomadic lifestyle. Let's get into it. Now, today I'm thrilled to have Alfie with me. Alfie is a freelance writer who lives the digital nomad lifestyle with his wife. He's just come from a few months surfing in Sri Lanka to now house sitting in the countryside in the UK. Alfie, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to dive into your journey.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. So I want to start by giving the listeners and viewers a bit of a snapshot of where you're at today, and then we'll go backwards and learn more about how you got to where you are. So can you tell me a little bit about what your life is currently like and where you spend your time?
Sure, yeah. So currently I'm working as a freelance copywriter, or just writer in general, really. So I just take my laptop with me, and right now I'm traveling around the UK, which is my home country. So I'm currently in Cumbria, but I've got plans to kind of move around with all different parts of the UK. Alongside my wife, and we're working remotely and enjoying the beautiful countryside, and we're house sitting on Trusted House Sitters, so we get to look after people's animals while just roaming around doing our thing. And I've been doing remote work for about 5 years altogether now. And before that, I've done a lot of different things, but before that I was a teacher of English as a foreign language in China. So I've been traveling for a long time and working for a long time as a digital nomad.
Okay, so you were teaching in China, and prior to that, when you were still in the UK, what did you do as a career?
Let me think. So yeah, before teaching English, so that would have been about 2016 before I left. I think I left for China in 2017, actually. Yeah, 2017. And prior to that, I'm also a musician, so I was working as a freelance musician, kind of very part-time, and then I was also just doing like odd jobs in cafes and like shops and stuff, general kind of retail stuff.
So it sounds like you've always been used to a bit of a fluid and kind of flexible work lifestyle.
Definitely. That's yeah. So when I've had been employed by a company or a place, I haven't lasted very long. I've always wanted to get off and do my own thing. So and now I'm a freelancer. I'm constantly changing, because that's what as a freelancer would normally do, picking up work as they go. So constantly what I'm doing is always changing. I'm doing music and writing and all different things. Yeah, whatever kind of comes in my inbox, basically.
So I definitely want to get into that and ask you more about how you've built up your freelance portfolio. But one question first, when did you first start to think, or when was the seed planted that you wanted to travel and work remotely?
I think the seed was probably planted the first time I left Europe, actually, which was about 10 years ago. I took a trip to Vietnam, which is also the first time I ever surfed as well, as I mentioned before. And I just really enjoyed traveling and learning about new cultures and exploring new places. I didn't know it was a possibility to work remotely and travel at the time, because it was probably a long time before it was kind of became a huge thing. But I knew that I always wanted to travel, and yeah, so it's from about that time, really. And then I kind of just built up my work around wanting to travel.
Awesome. And so you mentioned your first time surfing. I know for me and for many people, surfing leads us to seek out travel and adventure. Did surfing influence you at all to want to live that nomadic lifestyle or lead you to any of the decisions that you made?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. I remember the first time I did it, I was horrendous at surfing. I really couldn't pick it up and I was absolutely exhausted. And I felt like I'd just been beaten up or something by the end of it. But I remember I came out and I like had a nap by the beach, and I just remember thinking that was such a thrill to be in the water and experience the like nature like that, and really feel a part of nature. And it really made me decide that I wanted to make sure I was at least by a beach, or somewhere where I could get involved with nature and really
Yeah,
be a
it's such
part of
a
it.
draw.
Yeah, definitely.
So, going from teaching in China, how did you then build up this portfolio that you have of freelance work?
I was quite fortunate actually in that it it didn't take me too long to find a regular income from after teaching. So I came back to the UK and I was looking for something remote, and it took me, I think, maybe I mean, I say fortunate, but it took me 5 months to find a company that needed a freelancer, and I'm still working with that same company, and they're still giving me regular work to this day. So I was
Oh,
very fortunate. But I've also had to find stuff on the side as well. So back when I first started working remotely, I was still living in the UK to begin with. So I also worked as a guitar teacher and as a guitarist, and I'd play music with bands across the country. But then I decided to go fully remote, and I just started looking for stuff on Upwork. Was the main one where I found like people who needed blogs writing for them. I contacted some old like business acquaintances and friends who might need some help with their work, with their projects. And yeah, but I think the main one though, really, I think I've got work from was Upwork, because it's quite good at if you're wanting to build something up. But the only problem is you have to start off basically getting pennies from Upwork and gradually building up and finding good clients. But yeah, it's good. Actually, that's how we started working together, wasn't it? Actually, I just realized.
yeah, exactly. We found each other on Upwork, and you write for the website, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So is Upwork where you found that constant freelance writing job that you've got?
No, actually, that I found that off ProZ, which used to be kind of like a thriving hub of remote work opportunities. Although, to be honest, I've been looking at it recently, and there's not much on there. But it's always worth it to check it out because you can find some good stuff on there. That's
Yeah.
more to do with translation, copywriting, and proofreading and that kind of thing. Yeah.
So when you were looking, you were going on various sites, I imagine, and searching for anything remote, or were you specifically targeting writing jobs?
Actually, bizarrely, I was looking for translation. Because I was at the time I was learning Mandarin Chinese, and I really wanted to get to a level where I could translate. And I realized quickly that I was nowhere near the level the translator needs to be at. And as I said, I was very lucky that I applied for just a random one-off thing that I found on ProZ, and I got the job, and still working with them today.
Wow, that's amazing because that's a number of years you've been with them.
Yeah. It's still going.
And yeah, how much work do you get from that role? How many hours a week are you doing?
It varies so much. It's really hard to say, and it's nowhere near full time. But it's I managed to get a decent fee from it. But I'd say weekly, It used to be an average of around 15 hours a week, but now it's maybe, I don't know. It goes up and down. It's so hard to say, which is why I've got to look for other things as well. Just so when it's busy, it can sustain me, but when it's quiet, then it's, I've got to look for other things.
Yeah, makes sense. And so then you'll find other freelance writing jobs like the one you found with me on Upwork to kind of fill in those gaps.
Yes, usually Upwork. I do look on LinkedIn as well, because to be honest, I kind of would like a little bit more stability in terms of work. And yeah, I think I would also consider being employed as a remote worker, but I think it's quite difficult to find those kind of things at the moment. So freelancing is the best thing for the time being until I find something else a bit more stable. But at the minute, it's going well, so there's no need for me to instantly change. So I'm doing all right, enjoying it so far.
And what are some of the challenges that you face with that instability and not necessarily knowing how many hours you'll get or what income you'll get week on week?
Yeah, it just kind of puts everything into perspective a little bit if you just suddenly don't have any work. I mean, the challenges are you just have to really look and find. Well, I'll tell you a lesson I've learned is you should always be prepared for when you don't have the work. Because a couple of times I haven't been prepared, and I've had to really kind of scramble to look for other things, which has been yeah, it's a lesson there, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you go about preparing for that? Is it really about looking ahead and starting to line up jobs ahead of time, or making sure you have a low cost of living?
Yeah, a low cost of living is definitely something that makes you. I try to make sure I note down everything I'm paying for these days, because it's very easy, especially when I was a bit younger, first getting into this kind of thing. It's very easy just to spend all your money quickly, and then you're not doing very well, because it's going to be up and down. You're going to have these huge busy weeks and then very quiet weeks. So spending as little as possible is ideal. And also, I found that when I try to fill up my week with as much work as possible, it's actually, it never kind of gets to that stage where I'm overworked completely, or sometimes it will spill over to the next week, but there'll be clients that don't mind it being a bit later. So I try and just fill up my schedule as much as possible and prepare for quiet weeks, basically.
Yeah, and maybe that's one of the benefits of the freelance work, is that usually both sides are quite a bit more flexible, so it can ebb and flow.
Definitely, yeah.
You mentioned to me before that, and on this call, that you sometimes use trusted house sitters for accommodation when you travel, and I imagine that helps keep the budget down. Can you talk a bit about what Trusted House Sitters is and how it works?
Yeah, sure. So TrustedHousesitters is basically a platform where people who want to go on holiday, but they have pets, or they have a house that they don't want to leave unattended, they'll advertise the house on Trusted House Sitters, and you can basically go live there while they're away and look after their house and their pets for them. So it's essentially free accommodation, usually in a really nice part of the country. For example, right now I'm in Cumbria, and it's absolutely gorgeous here in the UK, although it is very cold. And you just stay there, look after the animals. You can have either sometimes just dogs and cats. Sometimes you have, like we have this time, we've got chickens. Sometimes they have horses and all sorts of things. Yeah, and it's really good for when you're a remote worker, because you just don't have to pay any rent, and yeah, you're in a really nice part of the country, really, where you can just relax and enjoy.
And do you need any qualifications of taking care of these animals? So, had you taken care of chickens before?
No, you don't need them. However, some people want you to have had some experience. Luckily for us, these chickens are very easy to look after. They just need to be let out of their where they're staying, where they sleep, and then fed and watered, and he showed us how to do that, and that was quite simple. But maybe some of the other ones, you know, if they've got like a horse or something, that might have a bit more special requirements, which I wouldn't know too much about. So
Yeah, I was going to say. Okay. What about, how do you find many that don't have pets on Trusted House Sitters, or is it mainly families or people with pets that need taking care of?
Everyone we've applied for has has pets. Yeah, I don't think I've seen any that don't. I think usually it is for pets. I'm not sure. There might be some. I think there are supposed to be some there that don't have. I've heard of ones without pets, but I haven't actually seen any.
Yeah, less of a need to have your house taken care of if there's no one in there.
Sure.
And how did you find before you, obviously now you probably have a profile and a few reviews on the site, but how was it getting your first job?
So we were told it was difficult to get the first one because you need the reviews. But to be honest, we got it really easy. Maybe again, it's good luck, but I think it might have been one of our first interviews. We got it straight away. It was our first or second interview, and we got it. And we've had one interview and not got the place, I think. So it was quite easy for us. I get the feeling it might be maybe easier if you're a couple, because usually it's better for them to have two people in case of any emergency. There's someone to look after the house. But yeah.
Yeah, so worth just jumping on and giving it a go, even if you don't have any reviews.
Yeah.
Actually, that reminds me of something. I also wanted to ask you a similar question with Upwork. You mentioned before you had to kind of take a few jobs for pennies. How was that to get started? And do you have any tips for anyone trying to get started on a platform like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a case of just keep going with it. It feels like a bit of a slog to begin with, and it really can be. I mean, when I say pennies, I mean they were really, really cheap rates that I was getting, but everyone said you just have to do a few of those, get your first couple of reviews in. And to be honest, I'm still not getting a lot of work from Upwork, but I get a good bit here and there, and I've got one regular client from there, and after a while, it really does build up if you just keep going with it. I see as well that there are some people out there who make their entire living from Upwork, so it's definitely worth it to keep going. But yeah, just keep carrying on and get the cheap, simple ones out of the way. And also, a very important thing as well is to find a niche and try and fit into that niche as much as possible. It's super important. I think when you're first starting, because then you can. There's so much out there at the minute that when people are just looking for a copywriter, and that's what you do, they're going to look for a very specific copywriter, basically, or someone who's got like a bunch of reviews. One thing you can do. Actually, if you're going to be doing stuff on Upwork, is you can make separate profiles. And I'd recommend people to do this. If you specialize in a few different things, set up a few different profiles on there. So if you're going to specialize in copywriting, if you do copywriting, for example, like I do, you could have special copywriters specializing in music for the first one, for example, copywriters specializing in travel for another profile, copywriters specializing in e-commerce for another one. The profiles are your best friend when you're applying for jobs.
Oh, interesting. And that's just because you don't want to look like you're too broad, because then it seems like you're not a specialist in any of those areas.
Kind of. I'd say it's more to do with the fact that people are just going to glance over your profile if you're not a specialist in that subject.
Okay, yeah. And then on Upwork, would you need different email addresses then for each of your profiles, or it lets you create multiple?
No, so these are all on your main account. So you can.
Oh, they're all linked.
Yeah. So when you
Okay.
apply for a job, then you can choose which profile you're applying with. Basically, it says at the top, it's like So I've got two profiles, I think, or three, and I can choose either copywriter specializing in, I can't even remember what it is, travel, I think it is on Upwork, or I've got an audio production one as well, so I can choose that one if I wanted to as well. But I just do the copywriter one for the time being.
Oh, that's a really good tip. And I mean, I guess speaking from my experience, I know when I was looking for writers, the website is about surfing and about travel. So I was specifically looking at people's profiles to see if that was their area of interest. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, one very important question that I want to get to is, what's your approach to healthcare and travel insurance when you're living abroad?
So yeah, I went with Safety Wing, who are they specialize in kind of digital nomad travel insurance, and yeah, I think they were a bit pricey, I think, and they somehow started charging me more than I initially asked. I remember I initially kind of agreed to somehow, but it wasn't too much more. And to be honest, yeah, it was really good. I never had to make any claims or anything, so I couldn't tell you if they were that good, really. But yeah, it was easy. It wasn't too expensive, really, considering. And yeah, that seems like a popular option. I could recommend them to anyone if they needed to find some insurance.
And so is that a worldwide policy that you get annually? Is that how it works?
They charge you monthly. I can't remember the exact cost, and it's not worldwide. There's some regions it won't cover you for, but you can just check. It's basically any of the regions that they don't advise travel for, I think.
Yeah, I think that's generally what it is.
Yeah.
And when you were choosing that, did you consider just individual policies for each trip, or you just knew you were going to be doing a lot of travel and it made sense to get a policy that covered you for everywhere you go?
I can't remember. I think we knew. Yeah, we knew we were going to do a lot of traveling, so we decided to just go for the one that covered all bases, really. Yeah, I think we knew we were going to go to India and Australia, so we were looking at separate policies, and then we realized it was actually much easier to just go with Safety Wing.
Yeah, awesome. And you've been to a number of places in the last year, haven't you?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, we started it in India. Well, yeah, our trip started a year ago. Yeah, it was a year ago. So we left the UK in March 2024 to go to India. We did 6 months in India. Then we went to Vietnam for a month. From Vietnam, we went to Australia. And then from Australia, we went to Bali. Then we went from Bali to Sri Lanka. We did a few months in Sri Lanka. And then we came back to England. So there was it was 11 months of travel in total.
And so you mentioned a few surf places in there. I'd love to hear about some of your experiences in these places, say Bali, Sri Lanka.
Yeah. So yeah, Bali. I did some surfing in Bali in Canggu, which was really nice place to surf actually, but it was extremely busy. Bali is.
I was gonna say everyone always talks about Canggu as if it's crazy and busy. So, but you thought it was really nice?
Yeah, it was really nice, but crazy and busy, definitely. Loads of bikes everywhere. The roads, the rules on the road are kind of, I don't even know what they are, to be honest. Still don't know what's going on there. But yeah, the surf was really nice. It's the break is pretty far out, so you got to do a lot of swimming to get there, and you do end up getting kind of tired if you're not as much of a strong swimmer like me. I'm not a strong swimmer at all, so I got pretty tired after a while. But yeah, it's a gorgeous beach, plenty of people there, which in some ways is good, but it never felt too crowded, to be honest. There was always space to move around and find your spot. And the other place, did you want me to speak about, you said 2 places, didn't you? Was it Sri Lanka?
Yeah, but anywhere really, anywhere that you've surfed would be awesome to hear about.
Sri Lanka is definitely the best one. I mean, Weligama is ideal for surfers. It's just amazing. That whole area, there's waves for anyone. Weligama was very busy, to be honest, but it was such a nice place to surf. The only thing was, so many people. So in the end, I did end up kind of moving away, and I think that Ahangama is another amazing place to go, and that's much more quieter, and the views are just absolutely spectacular there. You can just sit and watch surfers all day, and you can see like turtles bobbing their heads up and stuff. And it's fantastic. And actually, in Hikkaduwa, I didn't do any surfing in Hikkaduwa, but I think you can do surfing there. You get these huge sea turtles that just kind of bump into you, and they're about like 3-4 foot long, and they just knock into you as you're just kind of walking past.
3 to 4 foot. Wow, that's incredible.
It's bizarre.
I actually vividly remember the first time I saw a turtle. I was surfing in Indonesia, in Lombok, and I was so excited. I grabbed the hand of the person next to me. I was like, "Oh, it's a turtle!" It was one of the best moments.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I've yet to see one here in Australia, but when I go to Indonesia, I see them. So they're amazing.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. I didn't see any in Indonesia, but we spent most of the time in Canggu, and there's not much wildlife there because it's so busy. But it's amazing experience to see them.
Wow. And so speaking of, animals and also people and cultures in the places that you've traveled, do you have any stories or experiences that stand out to you with the local communities and cultures in the places you've lived?
So this wasn't a surfing location. But we spent some time in the Himalayas, in Ladakh, in Leh in Ladakh, which is like in part of India, but really far north and deep in the Himalayas. And it's fascinating culture there. It's like closer to Nepal and Tibet, so it's much different to the India that most people would probably think about. But we went to these amazing festivals where they wore like masks and stuff, and they were I think there was the mask, and they did these dances around this temple right in the Himalayas, and they was to ward off like evil spirits and stuff. But it was just absolutely incredible to be a part of it and see them do these crazy kind of dances. It was really cool.
Yeah, wow, that's such a different experience. How did you feel getting to be a part of it?
I was blown away by the entire thing, but I was also really suffering with altitude sickness. So for some reason, I managed to feel that most people seem to get over it within about a week or so, but I had altitude sickness for the entire 4 weeks I was there. So it kind of made everything a little bit hazy in terms of what was actually happening.
Wow, that's a long time to have altitude sickness.
Yeah.
Hopefully you were still able to enjoy it there. Sounds like you did.
Yeah. Mind-blowing place. Have you been to India? Did you say?
No, I've never been to India.
Mm.
Yeah. It's interesting. India is one of those places that a lot of people mention it, and some people mention it as the best place they've ever been, and other people mention it as, oh, it was really different, and it was a really great experience, but I don't know I'd go back. But I think the common theme is that it always stands out to everyone who travels there.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, every place in India is completely different as well. It's like going to a different country in each state almost. But yeah, so some places are just too busy, and like I can imagine many people not enjoying that. But then other places are just gorgeous and calm, and yeah.
Well, I'll definitely have to put it on the list. Maybe one of the quieter places.
Yeah.
Um, so you've been living as a digital nomad for quite some time now. Has the way you travel and work remotely changed over those 5 years?
Yeah, definitely. So the past year has just been exclusively working remotely, and that's been my full time. My full thing has been remote. For about 4 years before that, I was doing. As I said, I was doing guitar lessons and teaching. So it was more like the the kind of remote work was supplemented my in-person work almost, of being a musician, whereas now it's I do it the opposite way around. I do remote work and then I play music for fun, so it's completely kind of reversed. So yeah, it's changed a lot in that way, and it will continue to change as well. I think I'm gonna, as I was saying before, I think I'm going to look into getting a remote role for a company instead, I think, because it's the security and not having to look for jobs all the time would be quite nice, to be honest. So I think it
Yeah,
is an ever evolving thing.
I imagine it would take quite a load off to not always every week or two having to be trying to find new jobs.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
What's going to be your strategy as you search for a fully remote role?
I mean, to be honest, I'm not like actively like desperate for it. So I'm kind of just firing off a few CVs for when I see a good role. So I'm kind of taking it kind of easy because I've still got freelance stuff, but I want to make sure it's something that's a decent role rather than I don't want to be stuck in something that I don't enjoy doing. Because the stuff I do these days, I don't have any work that I don't look forward to kind of doing. So I wouldn't want to be doing something that just did my head in the whole day. So yeah, that's basically, it's a pretty relaxed strategy, to be honest, but yeah, see if it works.
Yeah, but that's a good position to be in. You don't have
Mm.
to leave anything, so you can take your time and find the right role.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Can you tell us a bit about some of the challenges that you've faced with the digital nomad lifestyle and maybe how you've overcome them?
Yeah, so I think the main challenge for me to begin with, when I first kind of was fully remote and when I first went to India, was getting out of the mindset of being on holiday, because you kind of feel like you're on holiday when you first start it, and you have to remember that you need to work and you need to get the laptop out and get off the beach and don't do too much day drinking because you got to work as well. But as soon as you kind of get into the routine of when you should start work, and then it really, you manage to figure out how you're supposed to do things a bit better. But it takes a bit of time to figure out your routine. For example, for me, I had to change my work hours. So while I was in India, I was working, well, I was going to say UK hours, but technically it was Poland hours because the office I worked with were in Poland. So I had to work 12 until 12 until 9, I think it was 12 until 12:30 till 9:30 roughly. Or at least I had to be available at those times because they'd send me work during those hours. So I'd spend the morning kind of doing all these things and being on holiday and filling up as much of my time as possible. And by the time I'd started work, I was so tired after maybe surfing and going to a temple, and I just wouldn't get anything done to begin with. But then after a while, you realize you got to take it slow. You don't have to cram in everything that you want to do into one day. You're there to work and relax and live, not just be on holiday. So there's that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what does your routine kind of look like now?
I mean, it's different these days. Now I'm doing Trusted House Sitters. I wake up really fairly early, usually about 5 or 6, and I take the dog for a run through the it's not really, it's just like hills that are nearby. Take the dog for a run around the hills. I come back and do the chores around the house that we need to do as a Trusted House Sitter, which includes feeding the chickens, letting them out of the cage, and feeding the dog. And then I pretty much get straight into work about 8 o'clock, maybe 8 or 9. And if I don't have any work to do, I'll be looking for other cool things to do, like on Upwork or something. And as I mentioned, I make music as well. I'm a musician, so I spend any kind of minute in between all that just making as much music as possible. And then that goes up until about 4 or 5 p.m. Take the dog for another walk, do the other chores, and then we just light the fire and watch some Netflix, and that's it, really.
That's super cool. I imagine it. Do you must kind of change your routine and your schedule depending on where you are as well?
Yes, it's always changing, depending on what kind of what kind of place we're looking after, what we're doing. But yeah, there's that schedule until April, and then I'm sure in April it's going to change because we're looking after 2 dogs and no chickens, so we're going to have a complete different schedule. But hopefully it'll be something similar because this is quite enjoyable.
Yeah, sounds beautiful. Where's the next location?
In the Peak District, a place called Macclesfield will be.
Well, we will round this interview out, but I want to ask you 2 finishing questions.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one is, what's something that surprised you or that you didn't consider about this lifestyle that ended up being important?
I'm not sure. Can you come back to that one afterwards?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And then the last question I have is, what's your top tip to help someone else who wants to build the digital nomad lifestyle?
I think the most important thing is to get started right now. And while you have a job already and while you're not a digital nomad, start building up small things and finding ways of making money that can support you remotely, and just start building up now while you've got a role, and then gradually fade out of the role and because just start traveling. And yeah, what else? Maybe there's some more advice I could give as well.
That's a really good one.
Yeah.
Build it up over time, because I mean, you did pretty well, I'd say, in kind of getting your full remote income within 5 months. But I think for a lot of people, that would be a bit of a more challenging transition to build something up, especially someone who's going from a full-time in-person role.
Yes, and I think especially these days because it's changed so much since when I first started as well, and that was only 5 years ago. But it's completely changed the way, because it's so many more people since the pandemic are working remotely. I think it's much more difficult to find a remote role because there's so much more in demand after people have realized how easy it is to do it. So yeah,
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think I mean, this is what I've heard from a lot of people, and from personal experience, it seems to be happening quite a lot. It's quite difficult, and also I'll just quickly answer the previous question. The thing that surprised me the most actually is that there's not much work in the UK for remote workers. People, as in it's going down from before. So after the pandemic, there's loads of remote work opportunities. Now people have got all these offices in the UK that they need to make use of. So they want people to go back into the office, because otherwise what's the point of having it? So that's something that surprised me a lot, is that there's not as many opportunities as you would have thought. So start looking outside of the UK for, if you're from the UK, for example, look outside of the UK for remote work opportunities.
Yeah, I've definitely found a similar pattern in Australia because COVID, the whole country was close to remote for an office job. And then over time, it's shifting more and more back to the office. So to the point now where I think there's much fewer companies that will actually offer a full-time remote job. So I almost think there's more opportunity to find a job for an overseas company that's remote.
Yeah, I think so.
But you find the competition and the it's more challenging to get a remote job now than even pre-COVID? Because I wouldn't have thought there were many on the market prior to then.
Okay, sorry, maybe not remote job. I mean, remote opportunities. So working from home. I'm not sure. That's my experience because but I also think I was very lucky with the job that I found. But I don't think many people really worked remotely completely before then. So it was quite unusual for somebody to be looking for just a completely remote role. So, but yeah, it's hard to say because I got one job and then COVID happened straight after that, basically. So it's quite hard for me to say exactly.
Yeah, but you have been doing it longer than most, I would say. And sounds like there was maybe a bit less competition initially than
I
there
think
is
so,
now.
yeah. Yeah, that's how it felt at the time. So
Well, that's going to be super helpful, I think, for anyone wanting to get into it, and also inspirational to start building up those remote jobs on the side so that you can work towards a sustainable income. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you wanted to share?
not that I can think of. I think covered everything from me.
Awesome.
I think of anything else.
Well, Alfie, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure learning about your journey. And if the audience want to follow you or find some of your work, where can they find you?
I'm on Instagram as Alfie Amadeus. You can check me out on there. I sometimes share some of my writing on there. Usually it's just music, though, to be honest. But yeah, I do try and share other stuff too. So yeah, check me out on there.
Beautiful. We can link it. And tell us, what kind of music do you do?
Lots of different things. I quite like instrumental music. I play guitar and I also create like instrumental electronic music as well. So yeah, a few different things going on.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to talk.